Sit back a little bit.
Stop the Congress.
Okay, we're live. So you can type in, welcome everybody, if anybody shows up. Get your cursor in there first. Take the mouse. There you go. There, yay. So what are the titles of all your books again? I'm looking down here. You've got, the first one was the Vietnam Woman.
No, Seaweed and Shamans.
What's first?
Inheriting the Gifts of Grief.
I'm not sure if we'll have a chance.
Vietnam Moment. Moon Tides. Jeju Island, Grannies of the Sea.
Wait, this is part of this, right?
Yeah. Vietnam Moment, Moon Tides, right. Jeju Island, Grannies of the Sea. And the last one is...
Oh, somebody, there's Emily Williams. Hi, Emily. Grannies of the Sea.
Oh, we're waiting for more people, right?
Yeah, we are. Because it's still a little early, I think. Let me just...
Can they hear us?
Yeah. Oh dear. Let me lower this just a tad.
Okay.
Hit the down arrow on the desk over here, not on the computer.
Okay.
Lower more, hold it down. There you go.
Okay.
That's probably as close as it goes. Hi, Roberta. Hi, Emily. Hi, Brenda.
Hi.
You may know some of these people. Hi, Kathy. Yes, I have that book as well. I have about 3 copies. I hope you love it as much as I do. Hi, Debbie. Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started here pretty soon. I guess we'll get started now because it is 2. And welcome, everybody, and thank you for being here. It's really great to have you here. I feel like I live in a very small town, and to be able to communicate with people that are out there via YouTube live. This is only my second attempt at going live, so thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I want to introduce you to my very good friend in New Zealand. How many months ago? Like 6?
February.
February, okay.
February.
This is Brenda Sunoo, and she is from, well, you grew up in
Los Angeles, California.
But when I met her, she was living and is living in South Korea, Jeju Island, and she is a notable photojournalist and writer. And she's written and published 4 books, and one is soon to come out in the fall. So I thought you might want to meet another creative person, but her medium has been writing for decades, and she has her MFA in creative writing. And you know, when I first met her in New Zealand, it was wonderful to be there in the class and have students from all around the world and, you know, from different walks of life. And here was Brenda, and she had done some encaustic work, but had never done the cold wax medium before. And so she was there to take this workshop, and we got to know each other. We've kept in touch, and now she's in my Montana studio. And I'm so happy to have her here. She's just a pleasure. It's my honor to have her here. And I wanted to share her with you because I could have had her all to myself, but I wasn't going to do that. So Brenda, say hi. And
hi, everyone. So happy to meet you and to share this time together as fellow artists and just exchange ideas and questions and insecurities that we all have. And that's why I came here.
Right. And so since she arrived, she's been, you know, from the time I met her, she's full of questions that are very thought-provoking. And, you know, she often asks me a question. I really have to think before I answer. And so I really appreciate that. And, you know, one of the questions that I think a lot of artists have is, how do we find our personal voice? And so when she arrived yesterday, I mean, that was one of the things that she was really very curious about when she came to my studio. And because she is a writer, and now she's trying to pursue, kind of go across the bridge over to the visual arts, that's a very different area of creativity. And so I think the question for her is, like many of you out there, and it was definitely a question for myself, how do you find your personal voice? And so I just wanted to address that during this call. So during the first half of this call, which is going to be about a half an hour, I'd like to just share personal story, ideas about personal voice, and then I'd like to open it up for questions. So if you have a question, please keep that in mind. Just know that's 15 minutes. We try to keep the call at about a half an hour because you're all very busy out there, and we want you to be able to get your questions answered. So just a little bit about me. Some of you may know that my original background was in science, and that wasn't a really good fit for me. But when I started to pursue art, which was really not until 1986, that's when our older son was born, and we moved to Montana. I was very encouraged by my husband to pursue what I loved, which was art. And it always was art, but it just was not something that I felt I could do until that point in time. And when I started to pursue art, I focused on watercolor, and I had wonderful watercolor books. I had probably 40 books that I started to accumulate over time because those were my teachers. I didn't have classes so much. There was the occasional workshop, but I relied heavily on books. And I think that just came from the fact that there's a lot of information out there. You can definitely find books that can help you. And then as I started to, put the paint on the paper and start to learn technique, I was able to kind of, get paintings that were technically good. And I started to get into galleries and made sales and things like that. But after doing that for about 15 years, I really hit a plateau. And I didn't know why, because I felt like I was accomplishing things. I had a level of success. I was in galleries and, selling work. It's all the things that the typical artist will say they maybe want to do. Like that's their goal. But I guess I'm here to let you know that I feel like when you are able to, sometimes like that goal for me was, I kind of got there and I found out how empty it was because I really wasn't expressing the art that I felt was personal and meaningful to me. So there was a disconnect between the beautiful art I was doing, which I thought was socially acceptable. And I think we all know that we can create art that's going to sell, that's going to get everybody to say, oh, what a beautiful painting. But then you're kind of left with, yeah, but I don't think I can really do another one of those. And that's the place where I got to. I just decided that if I do another pretty floral, and that's kind of what happened. I stopped painting for 10 years. So it wasn't until there's a really great book. It's called, it's by Mary Todd Beam, and I believe it's called The Creative Spirit. I'll try to find out that title, but it's Mary Todd Beam. She has a couple books out, and that was the book that got me out of my the trenches when I just, I didn't have any inspiration. And when I got her book, she's very mixed media. She's acrylic and collage and very innovative and experimental, and I liked her art. And I just started to, the book actually is like a binder, and you can flip through the pages, and it walks you through these exercises, and that just really got me excited. So I started painting, and but just like before, I very soon hit another plateau, and it's like, yeah, there's still really pretty paintings, but there's something missing. So then I decided to enroll at the University of Montana in their School of Art and go back as a student, this time to pursue art and fill in these gaps that I knew I had. I didn't know what I would discover, but I figured that even though my parents and other people had said, you don't have to take classes in art. You don't have to learn about art. It's all intuition. You're just either talented or you're not. And I kind of just thought they were right because I had nothing to tell me otherwise. But I just decided to see what I might be missing. And when I went back to school, first thing I did was I took art history. So if any of you out there have an opportunity to take art history, because there are classes available, I don't know, books as well. I had some great books, but it made me realize that going way, way back to the beginning of time, including cave paintings, when people did not create cave paintings or drawings for the sake of art, they actually created them for the sake of survival and sharing information. And it was a form of communication. So if you look back as far as you can go in time, it was used as a form of communication. I mean, imagine if you didn't have a pen or a pencil and paper, and the only way you could tell the next cave dweller or caveman how you were able to capture the buffalo or mammoth or whatever it was to do a drawing with, a rock. It was a form of communication. It wasn't meant to be hanging in a museum or anything. And yet, what do we regard as high art now? The art that we so love, it's these cave dweller paintings and drawings, and I love them. And I just they're very touching because they come from the heart, they come from the soul. They're as personal and meaningful as art can get, at least in my own mind. And then as I studied art history and even art that I didn't understand, like minimalism or the white square on the white background, and I kind of just thought, what is that? It all started to make sense to me. So anyways, fast forward, I decided that after taking art history, I was gaining so much information about what I was missing that I decided to enroll in the graduate program. And I was lucky enough to get in. And here I was, 45 or around that age, and I was surrounded by a lot younger people. They're in their 20s, and I was totally intimidated. I didn't even have an art background. I didn't have an undergrad in art. I didn't have a BFA like these other students did. And then I had 2 years to work on what's called a thesis, and it really did scare me. I really didn't know what I was going to do, but what happened was I was fortunate enough to go to the Mansfield Library on campus, and there was a phenomenal exhibit that had to do with the survivors of Hiroshima, so the atomic bomb. And I have relatives that are in Japan. I still have about 15 relatives that are still there. And I had been to Japan a couple of times and viewed the museums that have the remains of the nuclear bomb. And that was a long time ago before I went to grad school. But what came back to me were the memories of that trip. And I decided to, because it touched me, I saw a video of all these survivors, and they were 90s, over 100. They're not going to be with us that much longer. And they were telling their story about being a survivor. And they didn't have any blame for the Americans. In fact, they thanked the Americans because they said if it hadn't been for the atomic bomb, we would have lost many more of our people. So I was touched in many ways, and I just decided that that was a good place for me to start because it was something that I could identify with and it was meaningful to me. So that was the beginning of content for me. And I worked for 2 years to, I actually did a lot of research. I did a lot of reading, and I did a lot of looking at just anything I could find about the survivors and what it meant to them, and trying to put myself in that position. And then I decided that for my thesis show, I would expand on that idea and have it be about terrorism. And the reason for that, which sounds so strange now, because most people don't even realize that that was part of my life, is that my background has, there's fear, and then there's trauma, and there's things that were very, very dark. And that's when I realized that the reason I found these missing links a long time ago when I was doing these pretty florals was that was not expressing who I really was. And when I could go to that darker place, which the only thing I could find as a metaphor for what I had experienced was kind of that form of terrorism. And it doesn't matter what other people think when I tell them my story. because they'll just say, oh, it's all in your head. You know, when you have like, you feel depressed or you feel anxious or you whatever, they're like, oh, just snap out of it. You know, you'll feel fine, but not really. And so when you have to internalize the pain, it just festers and it gets bigger and it gets darker. And if any of you have experienced that, you know what that's like. Well, what does that look like if you have to express that visually in art? And when I started to do that, I realized that there was this tremendous amount of material content that I could draw on. And there came the science background. It came rushing to the forefront. And I was able to pull on everything from, you know, DNA and how it gets damaged during radiation poisoning, and anything that had to do like the periodic table. I would incorporate the science into my art. And it was a very different kind of art at that time, but it was also a catharsis for me. So now, after I graduated with my MFA, I decided that I wanted to pursue painting. And one of the things I talk a lot about is risk. And I literally, the only training I had in terms of painting was from my watercolor books. I didn't take a single painting course in grad school because I didn't have time. I took printmaking, I took ceramics, I took blacksmithing and crazy things. Anyways, so I started to exhibit after I got out of, after I had my MFA. I started to teach at the university level. I taught students that were in foundations courses for sculpture and drawing and 2D color and design. And I loved it, but my mother became ill and I decided that I needed to take a break to be with her. And after that, I decided to just become a full-time artist. And now I was facing myself with being a full-time painter and not really knowing how to paint. I felt like here I was, just this watercolorist with very little, you know, practical knowledge about what makes a good painting. I knew what made a pretty painting, but I didn't really know how to incorporate that content that I felt from the graduate school days into my art now. So it's been a journey. And I just want to say that I think what it boils down to for me is definitely looking inward. And it doesn't matter what genre, whether you're a realist, you know, you can be an abstract artist, you can be non-objective, you can be a photographer, a sculptor. I think all of us are like searching for that thing that's going to be our signature, our brand, or, you know, how are we going to stand apart from all the other artists out there? And I remember getting a comment from somebody. They had emailed me and they said, you know, do you think there's room for yet another abstract artist in this world? And most of you know that I did study with Nicholas Wilton, and I'm forever grateful for that experience. And I remember him saying that, you know, when people purchase artwork, what they're purchasing is your sensitivity. And that's always stayed with me, because I realize now as I paint that, and I've just been preparing this online course, and I just was like doing the last videos, and I'm like, I'm doing things that are so subtle and so tiny that I'm almost like, I'm not sure if anybody wants to know what I'm doing here because it's so small. I mean, is anyone going to want to even watch this video? The whole process slows down to like the snail's pace. Like you start with all this energy and you're throwing paint down. And I truly believe that every painting needs to live a lifetime, like that reflects our own life. So we were a child, and we need to give our painting that opportunity to be that child, and not be thinking too hard. Let it get ugly, because kids, if you think about it, kids are not worrying whether their painting is going to be ugly or not. They're certainly aware when their mom does not hang their painting on the refrigerator, but they're not stressing over it or getting depressed. And I just think that children's art continues to be like my greatest inspiration. And if I had a choice between going to a museum and seeing the world's greatest art, I probably would choose to go to an elementary school and see that art, because I feel like it's the most spontaneous and like honest art. I just am so moved by it. And so it was hard for me to play. And I did mentor with Nick for 7 months. And during that time, I remember the first thing he said to me and the other mentees was, you just need to learn to play, or not learn. You just need to play. And I was dumbfounded. I was like, seriously, play? I've never thought of art as fun. In fact, I thought it was hard, and I had fear. I had doubts, and it wasn't, I mean, even by the time I got my MFA, I didn't consider myself an artist. I had a hard time telling people I was an artist. Like, they'd say, what do you do for a living? And, well, I got my MFA, but I still would have a hard time saying I'm an artist. And the change came, I think, for me when I realized that I sent a proposal to a museum to create a body of work. And when I was accepted, I found out that I would get put into the largest gallery at the museum, and kind of freaked me out, of course, because it was like 2,500 square feet, which was bigger than our home. And I thought, okay, I put myself out there, and to me, that is a form of risk. There's risk in painting, and then there's risks in life. And again, there's this correlation between art and life. And by putting myself out there and being freaked out when I got accepted, I just went into this like hyperdrive. Like, okay, I did not understand painting before, but I have to know what it is now. And that's when I worked with Nick. And I mean, that's why I signed up with him. I went to his workshops, and I came out the other end of it, and it's like, I think I get it now. But it started with play. And so I'm very committed now to, I feel like there's a lot of like misery and suffering out there because people are struggling to find their personal voice, because I know what that feels like. And I just would love to share, what it feels like to be on that other side, where know who you are. You can actually work in any medium. You can work in 50 mediums and it won't even matter. Whereas before, when I signed up to work with Nick, I felt like I was 16 personalities. And, I jumped from medium to medium like that. And every time I did it, it was like, wow, that's like another person. But actually, once you understand the language of art, and I think that's what I was missing, was the visual language of art. And I've been talking to Brenda a lot about this because she is a professional writer. And that just means to me that she has such a great skill for the English language that she's able to, with her writing, communicate so vividly and clearly what she's trying to say. If you're an artist, though, you don't have words. You have a visual alphabet. And I equate that to design elements, design principles, to the things that I never got in school. I took art every single opportunity I had from kindergarten throughout high school. I took 2 classes when I was pursuing biochemistry, and one was an oil painting course, and there was no mention of color and design. The only thing I ever remember hearing the instructor talk about was it was an oil painting course in figures, and it was how much medium to add to my oil paints. So there was nothing about composition. It's just a void. And I don't understand really why that is, but I do find that having this knowledge now has filled my toolbox. I like to call it a toolbox because it literally is the alphabet of art. And with it, you can do an awful lot, but without it, you're kind of on your own. You've got intuition. There's this thing called talent, which I really don't even think I believe in talent. I think what it is more is it is hard work. It's putting in the time, but then it's also making sure that you have your toolbox full. And if it's full, I don't really think you'll have that much trouble finding your personal voice. But without understanding the design elements and principles of design, and understanding what color is all about and all the different characteristics of color, you're kind of at a disadvantage. So when you ask, is there room for another abstract artist in this world or another realist artist in this world? My answer is yes, as long as you can express yourself clearly. And if you look around, it's actually pretty, it's kind of rare and the reason for that is that most people do not get that information in their lifetime. They go through their lives doing the best they can, just like I did. I totally relate to that, being self-taught and feeling like, I'm doing pretty well, so things are great, right? But then no, there was a disconnect. So I guess that's kind of what I just wanted to say, is that it is achievable. And I just, I'm happy to share anything that I know, if anyone has any questions. So does anyone have any questions out there? It's hard because they can't talk to us, right?
No.
If any of you have a question, just type it into the little chat box. Somebody says like mark making color. So Darcy, you have a question. Let's see. I insist on my students.
Mark making huge. Dora said, "Hi Pam, I totally relate about working from within. Also being an artist needs to respond to social issues and connect with society. Art does not exist in a vacuum." Can I say a few words?
Yeah, please.
While
please.
people are writing questions.
Yeah.
I came here because, I enjoyed and learned a lot in Takapuna, in Pam's workshop.
That's New Zealand.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Takapuna in New Zealand, but I had to share Pam with other students. So I learned a lot, but I really felt a need to have a little bit more individual attention and ask more questions that I accumulated after the workshop. And because I am a writer and it's taken years for me to acquire my voice and be able to describe it and identify it, I have this yearning to know why, of my 5 to 10 years of dabbling with art, I can't identify my personal voice. So I've been fortunate to come here and get a peek at Pam's stages of creativity to discover your personal voice, which will be part of her future online course. And it was like an epiphany for me because it described in words, and I'm come from words, what are some of the deconstructive stages of creativity that lead toward finding your voice. And I realized that, for one, I was not playing enough. And then after playing, I was not really taking risk. So I've had to ask Pam, well, what do you mean taking a risk? And so she's explaining that to me too. And the other thing I've learned since I've been here just less than 24 hours is that personal voice is achievable, but you do have to be patient and do the work. It took me years to become a writer and identify my voice. And somehow I was just expecting, because I think I diminished the labor and the process and emotional suffering that comes with creating art, that comes in writing. I honestly did not appreciate that until I started and talked to writers. Right. And one thing that's similar is that with writing, I always break it down that what makes good writing, a good book, basically comes down to 2 things: your craft and then your emotional authenticity. And I think that's what Pam's referring to earlier, that I was spending to get the right materials, the tools, take workshops for technique, but something was still not coming out. Where was my voice? I couldn't identify it. So when we started to identify things we love, which elements of design we lean toward, it really came down to, like, for Pam, it was terrorism. For me, it might be sorrow after the loss of my son, which was for my book. But in terms of art, there are certain things I like, certain design elements. I like calligraphy. I like bringing in my Korean heritage into it. And I'm trying to find a way and identify it. But I see through Pam's flow chart that if I go through the play, the risk, and go through the editing and start to stop, breathe, and look closely and start to edit, I will eventually be making more deliberate choices and being able to move from the intuitive, playful, random to bringing it all and honing it in with a little bit more parameters. And that, to me, simulates and reflects back to what I do as a writer. And I have to say, I love art since I was a kid, but I'm ashamed that I didn't appreciate the suffering and the process, which is very similar. Yeah. But I just need to now learn the language of art and design elements, things that I never studied, in order to start to be more conscious when I'm doing my art.
It's a different language. Yeah, for
it
sure.
is.
I was just thinking of this term the other day of like the art alphabet, because we have our alphabet for the English language, but it's kind of like there's an art alphabet that we need to learn this new language, and without it, we're kind of crippled. This last thing I wanted to say though, was talking about how many of you out there, and you can just sort of like in the chat box down there, you can write yes or no, work in more than one medium. Yes or no? And I'll just assume that a lot of you are going to say yes. So I work in 4 mediums, as a lot of you know.
Oh, yeah, lots of yeses.
Okay,
Yes,
and
yes.
great, and because it's fun to do that, right? But I discovered in myself that the reason I kept jumping from medium to medium was because surely watercolor can't be my medium because it's not working. I need to try something else, and then that would work well for a while, and then I'd hit a plateau again. It's like, surely it can't be acrylic. It must be encaustic. So let me become an encaustic artist. So then by the time I've finished my 15th medium, including blacksmithing and ceramics and printmaking and photography, I realized that, you know what? It's not the medium that's the problem. It's me. And once you realize that every medium out there has its pros and cons, there are things that it's good at and things that it's not good at. So like if you're talking about encaustic, where you're painting with hot wax, getting a thin, beautiful line is not necessarily the easiest thing in the world. If you're a cold wax medium artist, maybe getting a really hard edge shape is not the easiest thing in the world. But if that's what you are, if that's what your personal voice is, it's not medium dependent. It's actually dependent on you. And that's where the research, I actually consider art to now be a science. So everybody here on the call, you are art scientists. I am just like, I'm now convinced that for as hard as I've had to work at art, my husband is a scientist, but he's also an artist, and I see how hard he works in science. But I can say I honestly work as hard at my art as he does in science, and you work as hard as you do in writing. And the reason why it's not easy is because it takes a lot of time and effort to find your personal voice, and then make every medium that you've ever tried conform to your will, and not let that medium dictate to you what it wants to do. So when I go back into watercolor, which I fully intend to do, I expect it to be very different. Because my earlier watercolor did not have the mark making, it didn't have the hard edge shapes, it just didn't have so many things that I feel like I really need to have in my art now. Bottom line is that you can be a mixed media artist. You can do any medium you want. So all the supplies in your studio, don't sell them. Just figure out what your personal voice is by playing. Playing is probably the most important thing. And being able to accept ugly is also very important. There's something about ugly that I've come to really admire and respect, and that is that it's hard to do. It's something that is, it's like the opposite of what any of us feels is socially acceptable. We have this fear of if somebody's looking over your shoulder and they see this ugly, god-awful painting, that they're going to say, and you call yourself an artist? Give me a break. But to me, when you produce something that's ugly, and by the way, that is not necessarily easy. I had an assignment in a ceramics course, and it was to produce a beautiful piece and an ugly piece. I actually had a harder time with the ugly piece. I remember that the only thing I could do was when I had glazes, I put every god-awful color I could, and it was truly ugly, but I had to work really hard at it. So, but what happens if you let yourself go there? Let yourself just go to the bottom of the bottom of the bottom. And then feel, I guess, observe the way you feel at the bottom. How does that compare to the lowest low in your life? For me, it was like, yeah, you know what? Ugly, that's kind of how I feel right now. When you feel dark and, there's a dark place you feel in your life, to me, ugly is that metaphor for, loss or any dark time in your life. And it's an important thing to go there, because then the only place to go is up, just like in life. When you hit bottom, and that can turn to a lot of things in life for people. Say they lose their job, or they, for whatever reason, they might lose a spouse or whatever it is. That's a very dark time. How does that relate to art and our personal voice? When our home burned, I was telling Brenda as we were walking through the studio, there's one piece that I have not for sale. And she responded to it, and I said, yeah, it's not for sale because that's the first piece I did after a house burned down. And I said to her, if my art hadn't changed after that moment, I would have questioned my honesty. And I think that our life is a reflection, our art is a reflection of every up and down that we experience. And if we can just be open to being honest with how we really feel, there is a color for that. And there is an edge for that. And there is a texture for that. And there is a line for that and a mark for that. But we won't know what that is until we kind of exploit all the possibilities within whatever medium you're working in. And the bottom line is that what I think this idea came to me was that we don't need to be told what we like. And we don't need to be told what we love. So when you ask, what is my personal voice? You're asking, what do I love? And I don't really think anyone can answer that but you. And so if you put it back to yourself and say, you know what, just, the thing about art, which I think is so amazing, and somebody told me this, I don't remember where I read it, but your only job as an artist ever is to put something down on paper, or if you're a sculptor, put something together and create. Your job is not to create beautiful things. It's just to do it. And then if you can just do it without any expectation, you're not trying to go for beautiful or anything else, you're not trying to sell a painting, then I think that with that freedom, you will make more discoveries than any other way. At least that's been my experience. So
there was one question, if you wanted to explain a little bit more overview of your online course.
Oh, yeah.
Someone
okay.
asked
So
that.
yeah, I mean, my online course has been definitely a work in progress. And boy, I did not know what I was getting myself into in terms of technology. There's a lot of technology involved with creating an online course. But I want to say that it's been a great experience. And I think I learned an awful lot about myself and even more about my painting than I did before, which is probably one of the reasons why I'm doing this call with you, because I'm excited. I think the discoveries I've made along the way about my own process, which is what Brenda was talking about when she first got here. I was so excited to show her my flow chart, and she's looking at it, she's a writer. So she's like, furrowing her eyebrows. And I'm like, uh-oh, I don't know, what's Brenda going to say? And, anyways, I showed it to her, and at first, I don't think she really got it. But then I said to her, I don't really expect you to get it, because my course is all about my process. And I created kind of a visual flow chart, because what I realized about my process was that there are 9 stages of my process that I go through from, I had to go from fear, procrastination, lack of motivation, whatever, to that other part where you're like excited and you understand art and you find your personal voice and you're showing in galleries and you have success. So there's like going from the bottom to the top. And I decided that I could break that up into 9 different stages based on 30 years of experience and try and flesh it out. So in this course, it's all about the 9 stages of creativity that helped me find my personal voice. And there were times when I questioned, I don't know, is that really the right way to express that? When I first launched the course, it's going to have to be kind of, hey, this is the kind of what I've done now. I'm not sure. I hope that other people will relate to it and understand it. I kind of feel like it's a universal thing that I talked to Brenda about.
No, I love it.
Well, at first she wasn't sure.
Yeah.
And then I was like having a panic attack. But I understand, because, but I also feel like having a visual pathway, and, I kind of look at it as sort of a roadmap. Like, the first thing you got to do is decide what colors you want to work with, right? It's like, so my course is, it's I think it's like 8 modules, which is 40 lessons and lots of bonus footage and like probably more video than you'll ever want for the rest of your life. I'm editing as we speak, and it's focused on the cold wax medium. However, I want to explain that you can be working in any medium, any 2D medium. Now, I'm not able to speak very well for people who do sculpture, for instance, but any 2D medium, from photography to drawing to, oils, acrylics, whatever. But there's a focus on cold wax medium because that is the medium that I'm now pursuing right now with a lot of workshops, and I've got a show coming up in 2020. So there's going to be a lot of new footage as I document that process. But anyways, all I can say is that if you're subscribed to Art and Success, thank you. Thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it. And I'm really sorry I couldn't answer all your questions, but the good thing is that this is recorded and I can see the questions you've posted. And what I'm going to do is I will tell you that I have a brand new website, and I basically had it in my email today if you got it, and it's just artandsuccess.com. You know that, but it's a brand new website. And the only thing I want to tell you that I want you to know about is under the support link. If you have a question for me, please ask the question there, and I'll tell you why. Everybody on this call may have the same question, and I would love to be able to answer everybody personally, but if you saw my email box, and I'm like 20,000 emails in there now, I know physically and mentally I can't do that. So what I've been able to do is, if 10 of you have the same question, I'm going to answer it. And the minute you type, how do you mix cold wax medium with Gelka gel? Immediately the keywords cold wax medium and Gelka gel are going to pop up to you, and you're going to get my answer to you. But you won't have to wait for me to apply, to reply to you. It's going to be right there. So that is a new thing with this website, and I'm currently populating that portion of my website. So please, if there's something that looks kind of odd, like enroll now, and there's nothing to enroll in, it's because it's a brand new website, and it's not completely done yet. But I thought, in the meantime, what you can do is, if you have any interest in the cold wax medium online course, you can put in your name and your email, and then you will get all the information I can tell you about where it is right now. And I do hope to launch it within the next few months. So thank you so much for being here, everybody. I feel really honored to just, be able to talk to you. And thank you for taking the time to be here. So anything else, Brenda?
Just bye.
Okay.
Come to Montana. The mentoring is great. I'm having a fun time.
Okay. Well, goodbye, everybody. Thank you for being here. And